Okay, so this is the time for public comment, and unless anybody has any public comment, I thought I'd just take a minute to, if anybody has anything, any fun, interesting, or bizarre COVID stories they want to share, just as a check-in. Anybody go on a cool hike or see something funny in their backyard, or any little tidbits anyone wants to share? Bueller. Bueller.
All right, I'll share something.
Great. What do you got, Rob?
Okay, so on our property, we have a bunch of small little sort of ponds that show up in the springtime. And today we were out walking. I was walking with my daughter, Suvi, who's 11 months. And in the water in one of the ponds, there are these clusters of frog or some type of amphibian eggs. And it's sort of surreal because you can see through the water, and you can actually see the little, I don't know if it's a zygote, my biology, I apologize, but pretty fascinating. So that was really neat to see. And like things are coming up. We have some flowers coming up in the yard. And so though it didn't really feel like it at different points last week, I feel like it does feel like it is turning a corner to be spring, which is nice. So looking forward to sunnier, warmer days outside, even with the way the world is at the moment.
Amen to that.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Mm-hmm. We need it. Well, I had a funny experience. I've been trying to gauge people's grocery store routines. Mary has heard this story. I'm trying to get a feel for where my family is on the spectrum of cautious versus completely, not following rules, and, like anxious, like, are we doing the right thing? Or are we being really irresponsible? And so, like, talk to people who, everybody from like major, decontamination zone in their garage, changing clothes, food stays outside for a very long period of time, and then when it comes in, it gets wiped down, to the other end, which is, folks just going shopping and coming home. So after I had this chat with a friend who was pretty intense about their process, I thought, I looked to my husband and thought, like, should we dial it up a little bit? Are we being irresponsible? And, he was not that helpful. He was like, well, I guess, sure, so based on no science or research at all, I went to the grocery store, and I wore my mask and I had my gloves, but I came home and it was a pretty nice day. We don't have a garage. We don't have a basement. So I came home and it was a nice day, and I just kind of left the groceries outside on the table and just looked at my husband and I said, well, I guess, I don't know, I'm just going to leave them there for a while. And he was like, yeah, I guess, sounds good, And then just like a random amount of time later, I think it was like 3 hours later, I was like, well, I guess I'll bring them back in. It was like, yeah, sounds good. So that's been our very unscientific approach to grocery shopping. I don't know. I hope we're not, infecting the world or my family, but I'm just trying to figure it out. And so that's what we've come to.
And your husband responded with wisdom too.
I think so, right? Like, what, what can you do? All right. Well, unless anybody else has a funny anecdote or wildlife sighting to share, then we can get started. And I'm going to just move this to a smaller screen just so I know what we're doing. Okay, so we're going to start by approving the minutes from our last call. And I just need a board member to make that motion, please.
So moved.
Okay, sounds like Andrew, and then a second.
I'll second.
Was that Rob? Okay, so all those in favor of approving the minutes from March 31st, please say aye.
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 Okay, great. Okay, so I wanted to start by giving Patrick a chance to just give us an update on how things are going, and whatever things you want to highlight, just a sense of how things are in our schools right now.
My perspective, things are going really well. You know, a lot of the things that we got up and running early are still up and running and are running really well. And, you know, whatever little kinks we had at the start are ironed out. So thinking about food service, the change to coolers at the end of driveways has really helped that process in a few different ways. It's hurt it in a way in that there's less smiling faces to be greeted by at the end of driveways, but definitely a benefit in terms of efficiency and safety. Next week, we're still preparing meals, but won't be delivering those. People will be picking them up at either Robinson or Mount Abe. And that's a little bit of a trial run for us just to see how that works in the event that people become ill and can't ride the bus and deliver meals anymore. That's sort of our backup plan, is to prepare meals and have them at fixed locations. So we'll see how that goes and be prepared to do that should we need to going forward. From the healthcare side of things, we're now serving from Addison Central, Addison Northwest, as well as the Mount Abe district. So that feels really good to be sort of a good neighbor and really helping to fill a need that the other two districts had a little bit harder time getting to the same capacity that we did. And yesterday started a sort of the new phase from the sort of learning aspect of things. And we transitioned out of maintenance of learning into continuity of learning. So hopefully it doesn't feel tremendously different for folks at home. A little bit more of a schedule for 7 through 12 than what had previously been in place. But I think in terms of the actual learning structures, much of it remains the same. So there's some familiarity and continuity for everyone as we made that transition. So hopefully that was pretty seamless. I haven't heard that it wasn't seamless. So usually I hear when things don't go well, and no news is good news, I think, on day 2 here.
So maybe I'll, if anyone has any questions they're curious about for Patrick, you can try to flag me down, or I will, if you know how to use the little hand raising button. And so I'll give folks a chance, because not everybody has kids in the school, or if you do have kids in the school, you might have questions about something particular to that. So Sarah, it looks like, has a question, and let me see. I think I've unmuted you.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Patrick, I'm just curious what the feedback has been generally from families about taking next week off as planned for April break. Sally and Nancy and I were in a call with Sue and Keisha today. Earlier today, we did their whole conversation that they had held earlier. And I guess in the Burlington district, there's been some conflict around between families about whether or not that serves the community or not.
Yeah, I've heard that in other communities. I haven't had any feedback from any parents about the decision for April vacation to happen. It's a statewide decision that April vacations would still happen. A lot of that has to do with the contract language. So we're contracting with folks for a certain number of days in the year, and those vacation days don't count toward that. So without any clarity of the end of the school year coming sooner, had we required that people work that week, even though people aren't going somewhere, that would be an additional, 5 days of work, and therefore compensation that we would have been expected to deliver. In addition to that, some people, I think, react to that in terms of, boy, we just got up and running, and why should we stop now? And others say, it's been so much to get this all figured out. We can't wait to have a break from it all and kind of know what we're looking forward to coming back from break to. So I'm sure there's a lot of reactions out there. I haven't heard any reactions, positive or negative, from any parents here, though I know they exist out there in other communities.
It looks like,
But if I could add,
hang on one second.
oh, sorry.
That's okay. I saw Sally's hand up, and then can I let her go, Kristen, and then I'll.
Sure.
then you can
Sure.
jump in. Okay, Sally, did you? Okay, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I think that you answered my question, Patrick, when you said parents, because I remember seeing some front porch forum people who are kind of freaking out, but you're talking about specifically parents rather. I don't know who the front porch forum were, or if you saw that on Bristol front porch forum, but there was a few, you know, kind of yucko posts about this, but maybe they didn't contact you, or maybe you didn't see those. I don't know.
Yeah, one of my practices is to not go looking for negative comments. So I tend not to look at Front Porch Forum very closely or Facebook very closely. So if someone's upset enough about it to do more than gripe on those forums, then they'll reach out to me or someone else who will reach out to me, and then I can respond. Otherwise, I'm just accepting that people sometimes need to vent, and those are sometimes the places they choose to do it.
Kristen, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm doing telehealth, and I meet with about 25 families a week or thereabouts. And people are pretty weary, especially people with younger students who they're doing at home with. And everyone, kids and parents, are glad to have a break. I think everyone's kind of weary and looking forward to some downtime. And they're surprised. They're like, I can't believe I'm feeling that way, but I am. And I said, so am I. I'm taking a couple days off anyway. But a survey of 25 families, everyone is glad, and none of them live in this district, but I think it's a similar dynamic at homes, helping kids do work, and that takes a lot of energy, especially for younger kids, I think.
It looks like Sarah, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, I did. I just have another question for Patrick. I wonder how the district is supporting families that are marginalized, that teachers and support staff had known about prior to the schools closing, have been keeping an eye on and working to support those families inside and outside of school, and what we're able to do now as a district to continue to support those families, and if just like what our role as a district or is in that process of protecting those children and those families that might be at greater risk now that there's no safe place for these kids to go to every day.
Our role isn't really all that different in terms of everyone's still mandated reporters. You know, we have a process where we're checking to see that we're in touch with every single student in some way, shape, or form. For most kids, that's some sort of a Zoom or Google Meet or something like that. Others, it might be a phone call. So we're checking in with every single family, I should say. It's not exclusively students. We really want to know from the parent perspective what might be getting in the way so that we can help support the family as well, in particular for the more marginalized families like you're talking about. We tend to know those families pretty well. There's usually a wraparound team to support those families when school's in session. Those teams still function now. So in particular for those families in each school, the principal, guidance counselor, classroom teacher, oftentimes special educators, there's a team of people that each have sort of different kinds of relationships with the family and will reach out in different circumstances to try and make sure that whatever needs they may have are being met. That also includes staying in touch with our partnering organizations. So thinking about the Counseling Service of Addison County, they have a role that they can play as well. So really trying to stay on top of all of those things. So really academics is a part of this, but we're also not losing sight on the social emotional needs of families as well.
So I don't see any hands for other questions unless you're waving and I don't see you, but we also thought we would, Mary. Okay.
Sorry, just really quickly, I was curious about, I'm sure there was some process now we're totally reliant on technology, so I'm sure there was some process to find out from every family whether that was going to be an issue. I don't even know if internet service is in every household, and I know you gave computers out to every student, but I'm just wondering if there's any evaluation going on or reflection on that, because now we're just, I mean, everyone's so reliant on it. So I'm wondering how that's going out, how that's going down.
It's going really well. We have actually surprisingly good connectivity throughout homes in our district. So it's not exclusive. There are definitely some. So we have backup plans that don't rely so heavily on technology for the families where that's a problem. And we're working with those families to try and help overcome those challenges so that students have, comparable access to the material. And that includes supporting families to find, affordable internet connections, and of course, providing the devices like you mentioned. So really, basically anything that might be getting in the way for a family, we are interested in knowing about it, and we're finding those things out through our communications home, and we're working with families to try and overcome those in any way we can. And when we can't overcome those, in particular technology challenges, we're working around them with more pencil and paper tasks and things like that, and telephone check-ins instead of Zoom, etc. So really just as something comes up, we problem solve and figure out how to work around that to support students and families.
So I know that like in Bristol, my son Sam's teacher emailed a number of times to check in to see, please let us know if you don't have a device or if you don't have internet access. So some sort of survey that went out, and then she repeatedly every week offers paper copies of materials that students can pick up at the school. So I don't know how many are taking advantage of that, but
there really aren't too many.
no.
Very few. And when there's a device issue, somebody lost a power cord or their device isn't working, we have a system to exchange those devices and have our tech folks work on them.
Okay, I don't think I'm missing any other hands, but feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in if I am. We did also want to provide a little bit of a finance update, and John and I and Patrick all sat in on a briefing by the Legislative Joint Fiscal Office on the education finance issues that have come up related to the pandemic. And I provided a link in the chat, but it's also on the agenda, which it does a really nice job of describing what was a lot of information to digest. I mean, I think we can all assume that it wasn't, none of it was good news. But it sort of breaks down what we're looking at. And I asked Caleb, who is not a board member on this committee any longer, but I asked if he could join us because I know that this group in particular had talked about possible ways to advocate with the legislature for some support and assistance for school districts even before the pandemic. So it seemed helpful to, and I know the full board's gotten this information as well, but it seemed helpful to just share with folks what's coming out of the, what the legislators are hearing right now from the economists in the State House, and what that's looking like for education. So I was going to just like hit on some of the highlights. It's a 7-page document with lots of info in it, but I'll just hit a few of the highlights, and Patrick and Don and Caleb, please feel free to clarify or jump in, and then we can, have some more questions. So essentially the education fund, a third of that is dependent on consumption taxes, so lodging, meals, things like that, and that is estimated to have an $88.7 million reduction from what was predicted. Oops, excuse me while I close the door. Sorry, family just got home. So what that looks like for the education fund, which was coming into this fiscal year in pretty good shape, it had a $36.4 million stabilization reserve and a $12.9 million surplus. But after looking at that significant reduction in consumption taxes, it's pretty much wiping out both of those things with a $39.5 million deficit. that number could also increase because some of those consumption taxes that might have been coming before the pandemic are have not been fully realized. They have until the end of June, and it's not clear how many businesses and organizations are going to fulfill that tax obligation. So that's the impact on fiscal year 2020. And it sounds like, from my understanding, the impact on 2021 will be even more severe. And I think that's because we're already this far along in this fiscal year, or in this calendar year. So for 2021, it's a full year's worth of revenue that's going to be impacted. So they don't have estimates for what that will look like yet, but we can expect it to be even more significant than the impact on this year. There's also uncertainty around the collection of property tax revenue. Not clear how many folks are going to be able to make those payments in a timely manner. There's also not any kind of property tax assistance for folks that are being affected by the pandemic. So people that would normally not be eligible for property tax assistance but may now need it because of the pandemic will not be eligible for that. So this event does not qualify them for that assistance. There's also a payment that school districts receive from the Ed Fund. They receive 3 payments a year toward their budgets, and the last one is not due until the end of this month. There may be a cash flow issue with the Education Fund providing those payments to schools, which may mean, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about this from Patrick, that school districts might need to allocate existing funds or run deficits to cover any additional costs that have come up because of the pandemic that is impacting this current year's budget. There is going to be $30 million emergency relief fund that's going to go to each state for elementary and secondary education. But that is coming in the way of grants that schools will apply for and that will be paid directly to the supervisory union. So those won't impact the education fund at all. And I think that those grants relate specifically to any cost incurred by providing education services during the pandemic. I think those are the key pieces. So this next budget cycle, a significant impact. The cycle after that, an even greater impact. And that's just resulting from the coronavirus, not including the other challenges that we've been aware of and working on finding solutions toward. Patrick and Don, I probably missed some key pieces there. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think the only piece that I would add is everything we're hearing is that April 30 payment that school districts are expecting is to be as expected. I think there are revenue shortfalls, but I think there are some ideas about how to generate the funds to make those April 30 payments whole. So really the concern from my perspective isn't so much FY20. We're nearing the end of FY20. Our last payment is likely to be made whole. The concern is really FY21. We're sort of in this, if the timing of this had been 4 weeks earlier, we'd be in a very different place in terms of contracts that we would have issued, et cetera. So we already have issued contracts. So we have to, by contract, issue them by April 1 to all of our professional staff. So we're basically already committed to all of our professional staff for next year. And that is significant in terms of what we can do to mitigate expenses for next year, because 80% of our budget, or 75%, somewhere in that range, is personnel related. And most of our personnel are professional staff. We have not yet issued contracts for support staff. So I don't know necessarily where that's going to go. Right now, there are no plans to do anything but issue what we were expecting to issue. But there's a lot of thinking happening right now about how can this shortfall that we're going to experience be remedied. And it's not at all clear right now exactly how much needs to be remedied at each school district and in what ways that might happen. But we're working on plans to position ourselves as much as we can to be able to absorb that next year with as little impact as possible. We feel like something's coming. Somehow they're going to have to recoup this money that they're not going to have for FY21, which is next year. And we need to be prepared to take that hit, whatever it's going to be. So we're doing some work to position ourselves for that.
Caleb, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to weigh in a little bit. I mean, I think you've painted the picture accurately, such as we understand it right now. To put that roughly $90 million into some perspective, that's the shortfall for the remainder of FY20. At first we heard 40 million, and then we heard 80 million, and then it was even over 100 million I heard briefly, but 90 million seems to be what I've been hearing now for 3 or 4 days. But again, there's some real question marks there. So that's just one thing, is that exact amount isn't known. But when you consider the education spending for an entire year, it's in the ballpark of like $2.75 billion or something. Yeah, I want to say for the whole state. When you look at, so I guess what I'm saying is that that's a huge number, 90 million. But also, if you put it in the context of the total spending for the year, it's as a percentage basis. Not like it's the line. Obviously, a lot of that total budget comes from federal stuff. The point is, as Patrick says, that's going to get paid. The April 30th payment is going to go out. The state might be taken out a loan for it. I'm not sure, but I think that there is clarity around the fact that the April 30th final payment is going to go out. FY21. So FY20 things. Just last thought there is we got to set the yield. This is going to affect the yield. And so the yield affects what you pay for property taxes, So this all that stuff that went out with our ballot, Vermont's education finance system is such that what you kind of have for projected tax rates is always kind of subject to change. And this is a big change that's not just your normal order of change. So we had a joint hearing House Ed committee with House Ways and Means, which is the House Tax Committee, last Friday, and we will this Friday. And so we will work collaboratively as our two committees, knowing that we're ultimately working towards an adjustment of the yield. And in the legislature, we're going to be doing a budget adjustment act just for this current year. So trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to hit on. I guess for FY20, that's it. For FY21, you definitely have some issues of budgets that are not approved. To Patrick's point about contracts, I guess in some ways you could see that as I don't know if a failed budget is ever a good thing, but I guess you haven't made some of those commitments in exactly the same way. So we've got about 18 towns without school budgets, about half because they failed and half because they vote later and are having to call them off. So that plays into it for next year. But the big factors are just, are the sales revenue and meals and rooms going to bounce back? Because that's what really funds the ed fund, fuels the ed fund in a major way other than local taxes. It's not, it's interesting to hear what Patrick said about the contracting situation. I do wonder, I know we all really want to envision the school year starting as normal in September or August, really. But I do wonder if that's going to be the reality for the whole school year, or if there will be some continuity of learning remotely in FY21 academic year. And it would be nice to have the school district have the flexibility to really understand what is the appropriate level of staffing, knowing that it would maybe grow in some areas and not in others to accomplish that type of educational plan. And I'm just maybe I shouldn't even say that. I'm just kind of thinking that flexibility may be nice to have, because it's hard to predict right now what it's going to look like to educate our students next year. The last thing I'll just flag is special ed. Special ed is a huge concern, and there's compliance issues and there's waivers that need to be gotten. And there are some school districts in this country that have shut down completely because of fear over not being able to meet those special ed requirements. And I don't think I'm not holding that up as like the thing that these districts should be doing, but I am saying that probably this whole remote education plan, upholding those special ed requirements is the most in question thing. And so that's just the last thing I'd say about both for this year and for next year. I think that has to be a very closely, and please correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Patrick, but it seems to me that is a liability that has to be closely watched, because it's there are obligations there that are just critically important for their own sake, but also just for federal compliance that are real challenges under this anyway. So sorry to go off on a tangent, but that's kind of what I'm thinking and what's swirling around, what we're hearing a lot about in our House Ed committee.
No, you're totally right in terms of the compliance challenges in special education. And that was the biggest shift, really. So during the maintenance of learning phase, there were no expectations for special education services. When we transitioned yesterday to continuity of learning, those expectations for special education began. And leading up to yesterday, and maybe even a little bit of yesterday, Susan Bruhl, our Director of Student Support Services, and her team, they amended almost 200 IEPs to remain in compliance and be sure that we can deliver the services that are needed. And there, again, lots of different circumstances out there, and they're working really creatively to figure out how to support students that need various supports. And so far, I think they're doing a great job. I think there's obviously, there will continue to be a lot to figure out, but they're working on it pretty diligently. The only other financial piece I would add, Caleb was talking about the yield and property tax, et cetera. What's interesting here, and be curious to see how it plays out. So yeah, the yield could change property taxes tremendously, and by statute, whether there's money coming in from residents or not, towns are obligated to make their payment for the education portion of their taxes. They can have some leniency on the municipal side of the taxes, but there's nothing statutorily that gives them leniency on the education side. So that may put towns in a really tricky spot in terms of making those payments.
I see Don's hand up.
Yes, sorry. I don't know if it's my internet, so it's breaking up a lot. So I'm having to really listen hard to get what people are saying. So I'm not going to respond unless I really have something burning to say. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm just trying to capture everything.
Thank you. So I know we could get deep into the weeds some more on this, and I don't really want to do that tonight.
Can I
do want to give
can I
people
just,
oh
sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
Because Caleb and Patrick are here. Is there talk at the state level about forcing consolidation amongst districts? That came up with someone from Virgins who said.
I would say that Act 46, of course, that wrapped up was a pretty mandated consolidation. I don't think any further consolidation is being contemplated in any serious way. I think the big policy changes that are coming and that are next up are Act 173, which is the census block funding for special ed. that's being delayed, but that's coming for implementation. And then the other thing we've been looking at is the pupil weighting study, which will affect funding formula. But no, I don't. I mean, last year there was a sort of white paper that kind of got leaked from the AOE about a single school district where you merge all the districts into one giant district, but that's not a serious idea at this point in time. And no, there's no further consolidation on that's being pushed.
My sense from talking with folks at the AOE is that there's really no appetite at all in the legislature or at AOE for Act 46 version 2. In fact, Act 46 round 1 is still being challenged in a lot of ways, so the dust has not settled from that yet. So no, I concur that there's nothing on the horizon that's suggesting that. And I think what's interesting about the weighting study and Act 173 that Caleb mentioned, 173 sounds like it's going to be delayed. I've been hearing the same thing. And the weighting study, I'm not really clear if that's going to be delayed or not, but the interesting piece financially is it looks like we would stand to benefit some. So basically for each of these, there's no more money to go around. It's just going to be distributed differently, which creates winners and losers. In 173, we were going to be winners of sorts. And on the weighting study, we were going to be losers. And so that will play interestingly if 173 is delayed and the weighting study moves forward, that we don't get the benefit of the one that we in the same year, but we take the hit on the one that may have a financial impact on us. So that compounds the COVID-19 financial realities that we'll be facing, as well as the declining enrollment that we face every year anyway. So sort of this perfect storm of financial challenges potentially that we'll be working through in the fall.
Yeah, and I just a last thought. I know I had a last thought before, but another last thought. In this format that the legislature is in right now with remote voting, we're not going to do anything that's not unanimous, basically. So as much as our policy committees want to do work, and we want to do the work that's critical to respond to this crisis, and we will, that's stuff like setting the yield and doing budget adjustment and very specific COVID legislation. I know Rob emailed earlier this week about 693, where we want to get the exemption for the construction counting against the maximum threshold. I would love for that to happen. I don't think even if we got that out of our committee, the pipeline that this stuff has to go through is got a bottleneck in it, which is 150 legislators on Zoom. And it's not a credible environment for debate. So if there's any disagreement on an issue, it's dead in the water, according to me. And so I just, it's a bummer, but it's not the biggest bummer of this thing. And it might be that there is a in-person session at the very end of 2020. Maybe there's 30 days or 60 days where social distancing is, we're allowed to get together in a fairly private setting and we can debate stuff. That would be different. But as long as we're working on Zoom, basically nothing but the biggest, most critical issues can get through this particular technology gauntlet.
I think that's helpful for this group to be aware of right now, and to maybe be in touch when we think it's more viable for people to, mobilize support for or against legislative action.
And I'll definitely let you know. And if people haven't checked out the YouTube stream, I can get anybody the link, but you can watch all of our meetings. They're kind of boring, but some of the testimony is really not boring. So I do recommend them.
Well, yeah, that might be something we could even share out with the public. That seems like, is that a new thing that's available now to people to be able to?
Yeah, it's a new thing for all the committees. So it's kind of a cool thing about this. So on my website, just like my calebelder.com, the link's just kind of on my main page, but also on the legislative website, any committee that you navigate to will have a link to their live stream. And if they're meeting right then, it'll pop up right then. Otherwise, it'll show you everything they've done for the last 2 weeks.
Mhm.
So a lot of the action is ways and means and appropriations. Anyway, I'm really going to stop now. Thank you for giving me
No,
the
thank you.
opportunity.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts, comments on the state of the finance world? Okay. So I'm going to move us to talking a little bit about some things that folks have moved the ball forward on, which are awesome. And thanks, Rob, for really starting that ball down the hill. So Rob had emailed Patrick and I with some ideas of how to keep our community engaged, which is really the primary focus of this group. And, you know, ways to do that that would be meaningful for folks now during this time. And I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I know this is on the spot punt, but Rob, would you be interested in just giving a quick summary of what you threw out, or what we, because we had a chat, a smaller group chat about some of these ideas, and I'm hoping to get a little update on all of those, but maybe if you want to set the stage, and then I don't know if Sally or Kim want to chime in on the postcard piece, and someone else can talk about the interviews, but if you're game, I would appreciate giving someone else a chance to talk.
For sure. So spawned off of our last meeting is this group, a smaller group of folks chatted. Was that last week? Time gets warped. School district, more more grassroots, sort of community oriented, trying to, I guess, share out to the different communities what the students are doing. Try to connect some of our students to folks in the 5 communities. Again, to sort of share out what they're doing. And so we try to come up with all these different ideas to, in a sense, celebrate the successes that the school district has had. I feel like with all the unknowns, right now, one of the knowns is that there are meals coming on a bus, that educators are still reaching out to their students. And now we've moved from maintenance of learning to continuation of learning. And so I think of all the unknowns that this has brought forth, we should celebrate the knowns that the school district has really, really worked hard to provide to not only the students, but the families of the students in our 5 communities. So we tried to have a couple different ways to say thank you, to connect, and I think we got the ball rolling on sort of 3 separate initiatives, one being a 2-way postcard initiative, one being some interviews and possible, I'm not quite sure how they'll be articulated, but an article or letter to the editor in Addison Independent, along with maybe other media sources, and then sort of poster gratitude gardens, starting maybe next week, for folks to basically show their thanks and their support, and to try to just continue to boost morale within the school district and also within our communities. So I've got a copy of the 2-way postcard in front of me, so I can sort of share out what that looks like. I know that doesn't really do justice on a computer screen, but this and Sally, I have to thank Sally because she's the one. This is all her work right here. And Sally, if you want to touch base and talk a little bit more about it, but I think and I know Kim jumped on this too, but the hope is that students or younger folks in the community would have an opportunity to basically become a pen pal, if you will, with other folks within their communities. It might look different per different community in the 5 towns. But in Lincoln, what we're going to do is we're going to have a little box at the general store where folks can come and pick up pre-stamped and pre-addressed postcards and write a note to someone in Lincoln. And the hope is that that person would not only receive the postcard, but then reply to the person that sent it to them. And so I've been working with Vanessa at the general store, Wendy McIntosh, our librarian, Justin Cox, pastor of our church, Sally Ober, to sort of gather a list of folks in the community here in Lincoln that wouldn't mind getting a piece of mail from a younger person in the community. And I think, in all honesty, I see it maybe expanding even outside of a student writing a postcard to someone else, to just hopefully maybe community members picking up a postcard and sending it to other community members too. So that's one of the pieces. The other two, the article and the poster garden, I'm a little less in the loop with those, but those were some of the ideas that spawned last week that we're moving forward with. And again, you know, to piggyback off of things that Patrick has said, this is more of a grassroots. Obviously, we're all connected to the school district, and so is everyone in the 5 towns, but a grassroots effort to try to keep morale high and keep people connected in times of, you know, isolation, mandated isolation in a certain sense. So that's what I have, Krista.
Thank you. Kim or Sally, would either of you guys want to add anything to the postcard piece and let folks know how they maybe can get involved if they're interested?
Well, I just want to thank Sally.
Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, Sally, I was just going to thank you for doing an amazing job. She handmade 100 postcards on this bright yellow paper. They're absolutely beautiful. And I actually have a volunteer in New Haven that's adding a couple of the little tape instructions. But we're doing something similar. We're trying to pre-address these postcards. And I sent an email to our town clerk and the pastor at the church, the principal at the school, as well as our librarian, to try to collect names of people who might like to get a postcard from a student in town. And then we're working through very grassroots, you know, talking to people, talking to families who have kids about whether their kids would like to be interested in doing this, handing them out to those kids. I sent an email to the Be Friends, the PTO group here in New Haven, hoping to get some feedback from the parents and those families as well. So trying to spread the word to connect this postcard effort. We have one other thing happening here in New Haven that just coincided with this effort, that was actually spearheaded by our pastor at the New Haven Church, which is we have some poster board and markers that we're going to be leaving at the church foyer for families to come and pick up. And we're timing it so it's over spring break. And then the kids can make the theme is what spring means to me. And the kids will make a poster and the parents will take a picture of it and put it up on our community Facebook page so that they can share their artwork with other community members. So this is something that the church really wanted to do, and something that the pastor had some money from the town to buy the supplies. So we're doing the gratitude garden posters as well, but this is another initiative in a way to share with the community the work of the students and bring some spring and energy into everybody's life right now. So yeah, Sally, did you have anything to add on the postcards? Again, thank you so much. You did those all by hand and they're absolutely beautiful.
Well, I was just going to correct that. The ones that are done by hand are still on my table here and still aren't done. The ones you have, I went to Kimball's and made copies. I worked on the template that that Rob started, and then I did it, and then I brought it to Kimball's. So those were actually done with a printer. But then, you know, the ones that I'm working on now I have to do by hand because I'd already cut and folded them. Anyway, something that happened during the thing, I was making, you know, doing handmade postcards, and Krista had just sent an email that described the postcard thing, which was really well described. And then an email came in from Christopher Ross, and he's like, hey, do you know of anything that's going on in your communities that's helping this time? I'm like, oh my God. So I just sent him that information that some of the stuff that Krista had sent me, and he wrote back and said, oh my God, this is fantastic. It's going to be a feature in the next paper. So that should be coming out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Patrick, you have your hand up. I'm gonna, oh, there you go.
Yeah, it was just, and it sort of connects with Sally's point. I was on a Zoom call with Christopher Ross today talking about our continuity of learning that is not happening. And he also wanted to know more about like what's another story that could be told. And I said the real story is the combination of our continuity of learning, and we talked about that a lot today, but really the efforts around childcare and food service and the continuity of learning as a package and what that means. So he mentioned to me today that he got pulled from a few other things, but that he, in probably Thursday's paper, he's going to write about the continuity of learning conversation we had, but that the week after April break, he was thinking maybe doing a story specifically on food service and a different story specifically on childcare. He thought one big story would be too much. So as conversations are happening and things are in the works in terms of writing some sort of article through this group of folks, knowing that there's work happening from Christopher Ross to write an article, I thought would be important for everyone to have that info.
Awesome. So then there's the interview idea. Can I put you on the spot, Mary? Do you want to give a update on that?
Sure. So Nancy's kind of spearheading that because she wants to write it. I don't know whether it's going to be a newsletter or an FPF post. I don't know, that would be too long, but maybe an ad indie. I don't know. But so she just sent out a few questions so we can kind of unify it. So I've taken on to interview, I think it's like 4 or 5 people, and I've interviewed 2 or 3. And it's basically what's a day in the life looking like these days, and challenges and, you know, good stories that are coming out of it. Those kind of 3 major prompts. So yeah, and then passing it off to Nance, and then she's doing something with it, or maybe giving it to Christopher Ross if that, we don't want to keep duplicating the, you know, so we'll try and figure that out now that we have that information.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you said this, Mary, but the folks that are we're reaching out to are like different people representing different facets of MAUSD life. So students, educational assistants, staff members.
Yeah, and we were pretty intentional about getting like all the different, like, you know, support staff all in different towns and different positions. So we brainstormed a while, so that it seems like it's pretty well covered. But I don't know if so we'll talk about that further, but I don't know if that's going to be a one-shot deal, or as this goes on, it might be just helpful to, you know, keep letting people know with different people's ideas and things like that. But
yeah. And then the gratitude garden idea, you know, just encouraging people to appreciate the folks in the school system who are doing all this work to keep our kids connected and educated in some way, shape, or form. So inviting folks to share messages of support at the different school buildings, you know, starting over spring break, but really whenever. And I think with all of these things, that it's like planting a seed and then just seeing where it goes. So some organization to get a ball rolling, but letting people do with it whatever they feel they want or need or are able to. And there seems like there's a lot of those things going on already in our community, but maybe not necessarily specific to education. So yeah. So that's kind of some of the things that have moved forward as far as engaging people in a tangible way right now. And I don't know if there are other things people would be interested in looking into. I mean, it sounds from Caleb like, you know, the legislative advocacy piece has to sort of take a back seat. It seems like the best thing is just being in the moment and providing support where we can and opportunities for communication. But if anybody has other thoughts or ideas or wants to, I don't know, kind of open chat time, I guess.
I'm gonna jump off pretty soon, but I would like to just say something. And number one, I'm just curious, Patrick, is the continuity of education plan that was submitted to AOE yesterday, is that like a public document that's online somewhere?
It is not currently, so we sent it back. So we sent it in, and there are a couple of questions they sent back that they're looking for a little further detail on. So we're in a little bit of the back and forth right now. So I'd be hesitant to make that a broader document yet until it's sort of passed all those tests.
Cool. Well, so that was a quick one. And then just the one last thing about advocacy for schools. Personally, I am excited for the day when, you know, I know that now the Commissioner Levine is talking more about surveillance testing and widespread testing, and that it's an important part of kind of re-engaging our economy and our schools. But I would love to see food service and school workers, but particularly school workers around food service, just really at the top of the list for surveillance testing. And I would love to see if we invest in our food service kind of infrastructure with that kind of really robust testing, that maybe at some point those routes can even drop off food from other organizations that are trying to drop off rural food, which is an increase, you know, food shelf kind of stuff. Now that's a little more far afield, but just focusing on the testing, I think that local school districts should be loudly asking the Department of Health for these tests. I don't think we can get them yet. I don't think they exist yet, but I don't think it's too soon to be loudly saying we are distributing 2,000 meals a day and we want surveillance testing for every single person involved. So anyway, that I don't know if everybody agrees with me, but that's my personal soapbox, and I feel that way pretty strongly. I've asked the secretary about it a few times and haven't gotten much of an answer, but I still think it's important.
I just want to share with everyone. I was on a call. I'm on the board for the North Branch School as well in Ripton, and there's a lot of people very involved in their own school districts. It includes Virgins and the Middlebury districts, and other people on the board are really, really, really impressed with what the Mount Abe district is doing during this time, and that the way that the community is working together, not just through this crisis, but through this whole this community engagement in terms of how we're going to make decisions about our facilities. And so compared to what both those districts have gone through, and people who are working on the other end in those districts, I just wanted to give you that feedback because they're really impressed and feel like they wish their districts had done exactly what we're doing. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that.
I'll just add that I saw also on Front Porch Forum, Sally had mentioned some negative comments about spring break early on, and folks grumbling, but I immediately the next day saw lots of other people saying, hey, let's give our educators a break. They were also grumbling about Shaw's, and there was a response about that too. But there was just this feeling of like, everybody's doing the best they can. Let's give everybody a break. You know, an actual spring break, but also just in general. Let's try to just recognize that we're just all doing the best we can. So I think that is also an example of the maybe more positive vibe in the community, which is really nice. Go ahead, Sal. Oh, do I need to unmute you?
So I've had something I wanted to bring up, and I don't really know when the best time is, except that right now we're talking about how there's, you know, we've had this crisis and people have been, we're all completely out of the box, starting new, we're making things up as we go. And so I wanted to bring up that we could apply this to our, you know, thinking outside the box for the whole school facilities and education and all that. And so I wanted to bring in another idea that has come up that could be tossed in with the what do you call it, the feasibility study, since we're, you know, got to think of everything now. And one is Mount Abe is sitting on this amazing financial resource of gravel. That is it possible that the school district and the town of Bristol would want to partner in some way so that that gravel is so worth something that could end up being part of whatever the facilities and education goals are. I've heard people talking about this in Bristol, and it just seems like, is it possible to explore that? Just thought I think I wrote it to Patrick and maybe someone else at some point, but just feels like we should think of everything when we're, I mean, if financials is our biggest problem, and if we're sitting on a gold mine of gravel, then maybe it's worth looking into how we could use that. I don't know how crazy it is, but maybe the folks at the feasibility study can figure it out. Yes, Dawn?
Yeah, I think that and many other things will be great if we had the chance to do a debrief of all of the things we're learning and figuring out and what is worth revisiting or opening up new based on this time and how we figured stuff out. Kristen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't live in Bristol, so I don't know much about, I know there's a gravel pit behind Mount Abe. Does that belong to someone, or does that belong to Mount Abe? I wasn't aware that that was a Mount Abe, part of the Mount Abe property.
I think it's actually the town of Virgins.
That owns the gravel pit? Yeah, so I don't think does
Yeah.
that have anything to do with Mount Abe at
We're not
all?
really
I just don't understand what that is, that we could sell gravel. I don't get that. I just don't get it.
Okay, I'll just say a little bit more, and that is that it's not the pit behind it, but what the school is sitting on, that field underneath that is gravel. And talking to like John Moyers, who's been thinking about that for years, and other people understand that that whole area is a huge pile of gravel under there. And you know,
so under the school or under the fields or
under the school. Under the school. In that area and fields. It's just an idea that some people have talked about. And one of the ideas is if you got the gravel out and build something in there, you could get a great zero energy efficient, universally accessible building and have it paid for with the gravel, that kind of a thing. I know it seems crazy. Well, it took me a bit to like take it in myself. I had to listen over and over, like, what are you saying? And that started making sense to me. I just think it's worth thinking outside the box now. We just did it for this, all the things we just talked about are creative solutions that happen by thinking outside of the box. And so I think it's worth being open to different possibilities. Other people were talking about a community, what do you call it? Community center. For a while, there's a lot of interest in Bristol for a community center. And that's another possibility of partnering maybe with the town and the district to do something like that, where there's an extra gym for the thing. You know, there's just a lot of ideas. It's a time for thinking outside the box, I think, is what I'm saying. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Can that be part of the feasibility study, Patrick? Like, are we still, is that still happening right now, or is that totally delayed?
No, well, it may not be delayed. I can give an update on that. I think for me, I think anything can be explored. I think process is an important topic of conversation. So we just went through a series of workshops in the fall to engage the community, hear thoughts, etc. I want to just be careful about ideas that are inserted in the 11th hour that didn't go through that same process, and wanting that to feel, wanting the community to feel like all of that work was still respected and whatnot. So for me, there's a process question that I think we need to just be mindful of about inserting ideas. Interestingly, that notion of the gravel bed that Mount Abe sits on, I've lived in the Five-Town area for almost 20 years, and for about 22 years, I've heard that idea of just sort of moving the schools somewhere else. I think it's important also there's not a great track record in the village of Bristol for allowing gravel pits to happen. I think we could talk to the Lathrops about their experience, which is a factor anyway in that idea. But it is an interesting one, and I think very well be worth exploring, but I think we got to consider the process that gets us there. One update in terms of the study. So there is a committee that has been formed. Kevin actually is the chair of that subcommittee. And we're going to be working to find time for our first meeting. So it's happening soon, but it hasn't started yet. I have actually been in contact recently, just yesterday and again today, with NESDEC. That's the group that we're working with. And they've sent some sort of initial numbers in terms of cost for the kind of assessment that they would do. And so we're in a little bit of a back and forth in terms of understanding that right now. And that'll be information that I share with Kevin and kind of work through that subcommittee on. So things are happening slowly but surely in this COVID world. Things are coming together on that study.
Go ahead, Mary.
My internet connection is unstable, so I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It says that along it. So then, rather than having that be something that's just kind of like hanging out there in the air, like, can we, figure out what that means? Like, it seems to me if there's money to be had and we're struggling with money, it doesn't seem like that seems fiscally responsible for us to research that option. And even just to build, I mean, if we're fixing the school, why not build a new school or something and then have it be part of maybe the school choice option where people go somewhere, the high school kids go somewhere for a year and then we build a new school, or I don't even know, but I'm sure we can fit it in to the different scenarios. I don't know, it just seems crazy that we don't look it up if we're struggling with money and we could have all this money. And I've been hearing the same idea, similar, Patrick, for years and years. And it's like, right, so why wouldn't we be thinking about that right now? So is there something like, I don't know, should we contemplate as a group what that would look like for a process, how we could do that if we just put word out like, hey, to be fiscally responsible, we feel like this is something that we should explore along with the 15 other things we're exploring, or however we would word it. But I don't know. I was hoping that we would have, I don't know, just a further conversation about it.
Can I say something? Okay, so I feel like that in the community there are people with an agenda to keep all the schools open before we see the results of the feasibility study, and that ideas keep coming forth, sort of supporting that outcome. And I feel like this particular thing to add at this time is too much. that we need to go through the feasibility study, see what they say, and then go back and do another process about mining all the gravel under Mount Abe, I mean, that seems really extreme to me to throw in right now. And so I just have to be honest to say that I feel like I'm waiting for the feasibility study to see what makes sense. And if nothing comes out of that makes sense, then maybe we look at all other ideas that are fairly extreme, I would say. But I think that adding that right now, especially in the current financial and world situation, is too much. So that's my one person's opinion. And I just had to be honest about that other piece, that I really just want to see what comes out of that. Let's look at it and then see where we go from there, and not keep adding and adding and adding. I think, having been on the school board for many years, it works very slowly, which I know is completely annoying. And I've been annoyed many times by how slowly things go. But I think we need to just kind of stop where we are, wait till we get that information, and then evaluate it at that time, and not throw anything else into it now. I think that makes it too complex. Once we get that information, if none of it is tenable or whatever, then we can look to other ideas. But I think we just need to slow down right now and wait for the information. And so, and often when I'm in a meeting at work, we make one column, which is, things to look at in the future. So maybe we can write that down as something to look at in the future. Once we get the study, look at selling the gravel under Mount Abe. So a parking lot, that's what we call it at work, usually a parking lot. So if we have that in the parking lot, then once we get through point A, which is the study that we're looking at, then we can look at the things in the parking lot and have more data to base them on. Like, are we stuck? Is this not working? So that's just my thought.
I can't tell, Mary, was that a hand wave again?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So then would there be a problem if, like, I reached out to people just to find out how much gold it's sitting on, just to get an approximate amount if we were to excavate is there a problem there? Like, just to get, just for us to have information. We don't have to tell, it could be kept within this world. And I just think that it just seems strange that we wouldn't, because if we fix the school, then we're locking that gravel, because we're not going to then fix it and then make a new one 5 years later. So it just seems like that should be something and I will gladly take it on. There's plenty of gravel guys out there, to just informally just ask, because this idea does keep floating around. So I don't know. And then it doesn't have to be a school board thing. I don't know. But would that be, can I just do that just to offer that information?
I see Don and then Kevin. Go ahead, Don.
Well, I just want to remind everybody that we started this process with Sue based on values. And that's how we came to those scenarios and those decisions, based on the values we heard from the community. And at this point, to suddenly just start adding other pieces in after we worked so hard to get all those values and everything kind of organized, I think our community is not going to be happy to be pushed aside for, the next best idea.
I don't know, I guess but how is the values, how is that changed by that information? I guess I don't understand that.
I mean, I think anyone in the community can do any kind of study they want on anything. I mean, knock yourself out. I mean, that would be a private individual doing something. I mean, I wouldn't You know, that you can do anything you want,
Yeah.
really.
I see Kevin and then Sally. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I don't think anybody for a minute would dispute that the gravel underneath Mount Abe or any house in the village is worth more than the activity on top of it. So I don't think that's a mystery. Based on previous attempts to extract gravel in Bristol, as it sits right now, it would require a change in the town plan and zoning regulations to do this, because essentially the zoning and the town plan are locked up so tight based on previous efforts to extract gravel. So even if Mount Abe or the school district wanted to do this, they'd have to prevail on the town to change the planning process for the town.
Sally?
Thanks. That kind of information, Kevin, feels useful to know. It's like kind of looking into it, and I appreciate that. I think, you know, if it was something that's just like, oh, here's $40 million, and then you say, oh, well, we didn't really consider that $40 million in the earlier thing, so we're not going to look at that. We won't take that $40 million. That kind of seems what it's like you're saying, to just check out some great thing that might come. So I think we'd be open to it if something fabulous showed up financially, and that's why I'm bringing it up. But I understand, Kevin, what you're saying, and that seems like it could be making it harder to deal with. But I just thought it was worth saying that, though, to just describe what, like some new information sometimes the answer. That's what we kind of all wait for, is those new things that come that really make it click. So that's why I brought it up.
I think there's, you know, there's a balance, and you know, we've worked really hard to create a process that's inclusive and collaborative, and you know, we don't want to undo all of that work. You know, at the same time, it would be really unfortunate if we weren't nimble enough to also be flexible about thinking as information comes up or situations change. And so I hope that built into the charge of the committee that works with the feasibility study, that that there is some, you know, flexibility to information coming in and out. And, you know, recognizing also that that doesn't mean like carte blanche for lots of time and money spent on wild goose chases, but sometimes really it is about just some basic info that would take 10 minutes to uncover, like that, to say, hey, you know, that is something that's been out there, and here's why it, you know, at a base level it would or wouldn't work. But I know that there are, or at least maybe Patrick can clarify, besides 2 board members and some administrators, I think there are some community members in the composition of the committee as well. So, you know, I think it'll be really good for this group to keep asking questions about the process and to be, you know, informed about how it's going, and to see what ways we can, you know, share out information on how it's going with the community. But I hope that, you know, without reinventing the wheel, that there's still some opportunity for input. Okay, now I've lost track because I see 3 hands that are up. So I don't know, Patrick, is your hand up in a current way?
It is.
Okay.
So yeah, I mentioned the importance of process, just as you were saying, Krista, and I don't think there. So I'm thinking about the concept of a public-private partnership, which was loud and clear throughout the process. So, you know, this could fit under the umbrella of a public-private partnership in terms of an exploration. So I don't think that it's an immediately off the table thing and it's out of process. I just think it's important to check our process as new ideas come in and see that they fit with the work that's happened in the past several months. So I think there's room for that conversation to happen. And there are plenty of things that are going to get in the way of this being feasible, but we could talk about those. So I guess that's my point there on the gravel pit idea or other ideas that may surface coming forward. In terms of the makeup of the committee, yeah, so there's 2 board members, 2 community members, and 3 administrators. So Kevin and Sarah LaPearl are the board members, and I'm forgetting the names of the 2 community members, but they both have experience. One, I think, is an architect, and I think he lives in Bristol, and the other is someone involved in facilities or building trades of some sort, and is a Lincoln resident. And then the administrators are Katrina, Floyd, and I. So Katrina is the assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum. Floyd is our business manager, and then I. So that we really have sort of the business and the education perspectives well represented from a leadership perspective in the organization, because both have a really important role as we move this work forward.
Sally?
I was just wondering, were there a lot of applicants? It seemed like a pretty stiff job to become on the committee. That's it.
I also let Dawn answer that. She was the one that fielded the interest.
So there were 2 community members who were interested, and it was Jeff Meller and Josh Crandall. And then there were actually 4 board members who were interested. And because we picked 2 board members and 2 community members, I had to choose board members, but the community members, because there were only 2 and they were new, I felt it was a great way to kind of spread the work and get more people involved.
And right now, sorry if you said this already, but there's a meeting date hasn't been set. There hasn't been any. Oh, I think you're muted still, Patrick.
Sorry. We're in the process of getting a doodle poll out to everybody to find our first meeting date, probably in the 1 or 2 weeks that follow April break.
Okay, well, I want to be respectful of time, and on the agenda I said 8:30 conclude. So unless anybody has anything else they want to share, I think we can probably close here and just plan to connect again in 2 weeks. And anybody that's interested in any of the things that we talked about, the more people, the merrier. Other ideas that you might have, feel free to send me a note. And in the meantime, we'll just, I guess, keep on keeping on, and we'll connect in 2 weeks. And I do need a motion to adjourn, if I can get a board member to do that.
I move.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay. Oh, I didn't ask for, I'm assuming there's no public comment. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. Be well, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, if not before then.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Krista.
All
Thanks,
right,
Krista.
thanks,
You
everybody.
too. See ya.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.